Welcome to the Phil and H Travel Podcast. Is it worth it?
Absolutely glad to be here.
So imagine this. You're stepping off a ferry deck,
Yep.
right? The salt wind is just whipping through your hair, and you look up to see this massive 2,500-year-old marble doorway just perfectly framing the Aegean Sea.
The Portara.
Exactly, the Portara. So you drag your suitcase down the metal ramp, and you immediately breathe in that scent of, I don't know, charcoal and roasting lamb from all the waterfront tavernas.
Oh, yeah. That smell is iconic.
It really is. And right then, you have this sudden, just overwhelming realization that your entire week's stay on this spectacular island is going to cost you less than like a 3-night stint on the island right next door.
Right. And that realization, that exact moment, is what is driving probably the most massive shift in Mediterranean travel right now.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, the financial landscape of the Greek islands has just completely fractured.
It really has. So today, our mission in this deep dive into our sources is unpacking Naxos in 2026.
The year everything shifted.
Exactly. We are looking at a landscape where the traditional heavyweights, specifically Santorini and Mykonos, are quite literally pricing themselves into a corner.
Yeah, they're throwing up these massive financial walls just to keep people out.
Right. Well, just 90 minutes away, right across the water, sits Naxos, an island that honestly offers genuinely better beaches, genuinely lower prices, and a culture that still feels remarkably, authentically Greek.
It's actually the largest of the Cycladic islands, too.
It is, and it's quietly becoming the most important travel story of the year.
Which is exactly why we need to deliver a hard reality check right out of the gate.
Hit me.
We promise a logistics-first, totally no-spin approach in this deep dive into our sources. Because, look, if you're listening to this hoping for that old narrative of cheap, undiscovered Greece...
Oh, that's long gone.
Yeah, you need to know that era is completely dead. But the mathematics of value, like the true, undeniable return on investment, are very much alive if you just know how to read the data.
So what are we looking at?
We are talking about a massive, frankly intimidating cost reality on Naxos today. We've got hotel nights that swing wildly from 54 euros in the shoulder season.
Which is amazing.
Right, but then they go all the way up to a staggering 511 euros in July.
Wow. 511.
Yep. Plus, we're talking about 37 euro ferry rides from Piraeus and a local 3 euro port tax that, frankly, looks like a complete joke next to the 20 euro toll Santorini is now demanding.
It's wild. So if you're listening right now, here's what we're laying out for you today. This deep dive is tailor-made for you if you're, say, a mid-range couple trying to maximize a budget.
Or a family looking for a sandy beach that won't require taking out a second mortgage.
Right. Or even just a returning traveler who simply refuses to do the whole Santorini circus twice. We're going to cover 11 specific segments today.
We're going to pinpoint the exact psychological and logistical reasons why the first 2 weeks of August are literally the worst possible time you could visit. The absolute worst. And we're going to expose the ultimate trap, which is arriving on this sprawling 430 square kilometer island without a booked car.
That is a nightmare.
Ooh.
But to really grasp what is happening on Naxos, we have to look at the permanent shift in the Greek island landscape. The data from our sources proves it undeniably.
Okay, let's get into the numbers.
The single number that reframes everything you thought you knew about Naxos in 2026 is 20 euros.
See, 20 euros, it sounds like such a small number in isolation. I mean, it's a 20 euro bill. You spend that on 2 coffees at the airport without even thinking.
Exactly.
But think about what that 20 euros represents in this specific context. That is the cruise passenger tax that Santorini and Mykonos are now actively charging every single visitor during the peak season.
Yeah, they introduced this concept back in July 2025, and it has only continued to escalate and really solidify into 2026.
It's a literal toll gate. Like, it's a mechanism designed not to welcome you, but to manage you.
Manage the herd. Right. And then you look at Naxos. Naxos is charging a 3 euro tax in the shoulder season and maybe 5 euros at absolute peak. Think about the physical reality of that gap.
It's insane.
You're sailing the exact same agency. You're bathed in the exact same pristine, almost blinding Cycladic light. You are walking through the exact same whitewashed villages with the blue domes.
Yep.
But the price gap, simply to step foot into that experience, is now mathematically impossible to justify.
It's a deliberate economic wall built by Santorini and Mykonos just to manage their overflow. But to truly understand why Naxos can charge 3 euros while Santorini charges 20, We have to look at the sheer physical scale.
Right, the size difference.
Yeah. Naxos is 430 square kilometers. That is massive. It is roughly 10 times the physical size of Santorini.
10 times.
10 times. And according to every serious Greek islands guide published this year, Naxos doesn't just have more land, it holds the best sandy beaches in the entire Cyclades network.
Oh, without a doubt.
Now, take that vast physical size and pair it with the human footprint. This is where it gets crazy. Santorini takes in 2 million tourists annually, and it forcibly crams them in alongside a local year-round population of just 15,000 people.
2 million on top of 15,000.
Right. Now look at Naxos, which again is 10 times larger. It hosts roughly 350,000 visitors against a local population of 20,000.
Okay, wait. I am so glad you brought up that ratio, because it dictates how your nervous system actually feels on vacation.
Oh, 100%.
If you look at Santorini, imagine someone organizing this massive, deafening stadium concert-like Taylor Swift-era's tour-level event and dropping it right in the middle of a tiny, fragile, historic village.
That is exactly what it feels like.
Every single piece of infrastructure is buckling under the weight. The water pressure drops, the electrical grid strains. Every cobblestone pathway is just choked with bodies. You aren't a guest anymore. You're just part of this massive sweating herd.
Yeah, that's the 2,015,000 reality.
Exactly. But when you arrive on Naxos, you have 350,000 visitors spreading out across 430 square kilometers. And they're living alongside 20,000 locals who actually live there year-round.
It doesn't feel like a theme park.
No, it feels like a steady, manageable hum of visitors integrating into a functioning, living city. You're a guest in their economy, not the sole reason their economy exists.
And the infrastructure on Naxos doesn't buckle because the ratio allows the island to actually breathe.
Okay, but hold on. Let me stop you right there. Because I'm looking at these numbers from our sources, and something doesn't add up for me.
That's it.
You just told me that Naxos feels authentic, that it's this living, breathing, fair economy. But you also just said that hotel averages go from 54 euros a night in December all the way to an average of 511 euros a night in July.
Yeah, they do.
That is a massive spike. If they're jacking the price up to 511 euros the second the sun comes out, doesn't that mean Naxos is just secretly trying to become the new Santorini? Like, aren't they just price gouging the moment they get a captive audience?
Look, it is a completely fair assumption to make when you look at that 511 euro figure, but you have to look at the underlying mechanics of island hospitality.
Okay, explain it to me.
This seasonal price swing, which, by the way, is officially the widest percentage swing in the entire Mediterranean right now, is not some malicious pivot to a luxury-only model. It's not a loss of authenticity.
Then what is it?
It is the pure, brutal mathematical reality of finite supply meeting highly concentrated demand. You have an island economy that essentially hibernates in the winter, hotels close, staff go back to the mainland or focus on agriculture.
Right.
Then suddenly, that same island is expected to absorb 350,000 people over a hyper-condensed summer window. The physical rooms are finite. They cannot instantly build more hotels for a 10-week rush.
So the algorithm just takes over.
Exactly. The critical difference between Naxos and Santorini is the booking window reality. Our sources show a highly specific algorithm at play here.
What's the magic number?
77 days. If you book Naxos at least 77 days ahead of your arrival, the price drops dramatically.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the local hoteliers reward preparation because it secures their baseline income for the volatile summer. But if you try to book inside 14 days...
Like a last-minute trip.
Right. If you just decide on a whim in mid-July to hop over to Naxos, then yes, Naxos will actually cost you more than a mediocre room in Santorini because the Naxos supply is genuinely exhausted. You are paying a penalty for taking one of the last 3 beds on a 430 square kilometer island.
Okay. So you aren't paying for luxury at that 511 euro point. You are literally just paying a scarcity tax.
Precisely.
Which means the single most critical decision you're going to make about this trip isn't which hotel you stay in or which beach you go to. If July prices can mimic Santorini, then when you choose to step on that ferry dictates absolutely everything about your financial and emotional experience.
The calendar is the ultimate dictator of value on Naxos. Let's look at it month by month because the variance is staggering.
Let's do it.
We are talking about an over 600% price variance from low season to peak season. Let's start with April and early May.
Okay.
You're looking at hotel prices hovering around a highly attractive €80 per night. But you are making massive logistical trade-offs for that price.
Like what?
The ferries are running on a heavily reduced winter schedule, meaning you might have to wait a day or two in Athens. The sea temperatures are simply too cold for anyone to comfortably swim. And the landscape is totally different. It is carpeted in dense wildflowers.
And look, I have to say, the wildflower landscape is objectively stunning. If you're a hiker or like a serious landscape photographer, walking through these inland fields of vibrant yellow and purple with the deep blue of the Aegean Sea in the background.
It's beautiful.
It is. And literally not seeing another tourist for miles. That is a pure, magical experience. You feel like you have the entire Mediterranean to yourself. But you cannot pretend it's a beach holiday.
No, definitely not.
If you put on your swimsuit and dive into that April water, your lungs are going to seize up. It is physically freezing. It's an active holiday, not a lounging holiday.
Which brings us to late May into mid-June. According to all the data, this is sweet spot number 1.
Sweet spot.
And hotel prices start to creep up, sitting comfortably around 150 to 200 euros per night. The ferry operators recognize the shift and start running their full summer schedules, so access becomes seamless.
And the water.
The water has finally warmed up to a swimmable 21 degrees Celsius. And while the tavernas are lively, the crowds are entirely manageable. You can still get a table without a reservation.
That sounds perfect.
It is. Then we hit July. This is where the math gets incredibly aggressive. You are suddenly looking at 400 to 511 euros per night for a standard room.
Ouch.
The ferries are packed to the railings with international travelers. The main town, Chora, hits absolute physical capacity, and you are dealing with relentless daytime temperatures hovering around 32 degrees.
Ugh, 32 degrees in a stone labyrinth of a town with no breeze. That is oppressive.
It gets worse.
Wait, July isn't even the peak.
Nope, July isn't even the peak of the madness. We have to talk about the absolute worst window of the entire calendar year, the first 2 weeks of August.
So, okay, if April is too freezing to swim, and August is this overwhelming period where the Greek mainland holidaymakers arrive en masse alongside all the international tourists, how narrow is the actual window for the quote-unquote perfect Greek island trip?
Very narrow.
Are we talking about a matter of just a few weeks where the weather, the prices, and the crowds actually align?
Mathematically, yes. We are talking about 2 very distinct, very narrow windows of optimal viability. Because you need to understand exactly what those first 2 weeks of August look like on a logistical level.
Lay it on me.
It is a functional nightmare. Tavernas that usually pride themselves on welcoming walk-ins and having that laid-back Greek hospitality, they suddenly require strict, rigid reservations days in advance.
That ruins the vibe completely.
It does. And the famous beach clubs at Plaka and Agiana, the ones with the plush sunbeds, they hit total physical capacity by 11:00 a.m.
11:00 a.m.
If you arrive at noon, you are sitting on your towel in the blazing sun. It is a total saturation of the island's resources. But if you have the discipline to wait out that August storm, you hit sweet spot number 2.
Which is?
Mid-September to mid-October.
Oh.
The temporary summer prices crash back down to a highly reasonable 120 euros per night. And crucially, the sea has been baking under the Mediterranean sun all summer long.
Also, it's warm.
It is a glorious bath-like 23 degrees. The ferries are still running their full routes, but the crushing crowds thin out dramatically as kids go back to school across Europe.
That sounds amazing. So what happens from November to March? Like if I find a 54-euro flight in January, should I take it?
Well, from November through March, the island is essentially closed to tourism.
Really?
Closed. Yes. Most of the beach-facing hotels go completely dark. Many of the celebrated tavernas shutter their windows to perform maintenance or simply rest. The ferry companies reduce their frequency to just 3 times a week because there's no demand.
Wow.
It's a completely different world, a quiet, insular, agricultural community. But regardless of when you go during the operational summer months, you have to be prepared to navigate 3 major logistical crowd flashpoints.
Okay, what are they?
The Portara at sunset, Plaka Beach, between noon and 4 p.m. in July and August, and the Saturday ferry arrivals at the Chora port.
Okay, we're going to dig into how to survive those exact flashpoints later. But first, once you've actually navigated that calendar, you've booked your time off work, and nailed down your perfect month, you have to physically get to the island.
Right.
And the sensory scene of arriving on Naxos, it's something that will imprint on your memory forever. You almost always arrive by ferry from Athens' massive Piraeus port, sailing directly into the main town of Naxos, which is called Chora.
Beautiful approach.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
As you stand on the outer deck of the ship, the sensory profile of the island hits you before you even dock. You feel the warm, heavy salt wind whipping off the agent. You can literally smell the charcoal and the grilling souvlaki wafting directly from the portside tavernas across the water.
Yeah, you can almost taste it.
And if the wind is blowing just right from the mountains, you can actually hear the faint metallic clinking of donkey bells from the inland hills.
That's amazing.
And visually, the sheer shock of the Portara. It's this massive, imposing, 2,500-year-old marble doorway. It was meant to be a temple of Apollo, but it was never finished. It just stands alone on a tiny little islet connected to the mainland by a causeway, perfectly framing the town right as you pull into the harbor.
It is a visually stunning arrival, I'll give you that. But we need to strip away the romance for a second and look at the hard logistics of that ferry ride itself.
Bring me back down to earth.
Because there are two drastically different ways to experience that crossing. The primary option is the Blue Star Ferry. This is the absolute workhorse of the agency.
Everyone knows the Blue Star.
Right. It costs between 37 and 45 euros for a one-way ticket, and it takes roughly 4 hours to reach Naxos. It is a massive stable ship, offering highly comfortable indoor seating, a full cafeteria, and those big open outdoor decks you just described.
Sounds nice and easy. What's the other option?
Yeah. The secondary option is the Seajets high-speed vessel. That ticket runs a much steeper 55 to 75 euros, and it cuts the transit time down to about 2.5 hours.
Okay. Faster, but more expensive.
But you have to factor in the physical reality of the Aegean Sea in the summer. The Seajets ride is notoriously rough when the summer Meltemi winds pick up.
Oh, I've heard horror stories.
It is a smaller, closed-cabin catamaran. You cannot go outside to get fresh air, and violent motion sickness is a very real, very common factor that literally ruins the first day of many tourists' itineraries.
Oh, I cannot stress enough how miserable it is to be trapped in a sealed cabin smelling diesel fuel while the boat violently pitches up and down for 2.5 hours.
It's awful.
Take the 4-hour Blue Star. Stand on the deck. Let the journey be part of the vacation. Because once you finally step off that ferry, you enter what our sources describe as the 24-hour psychological arc of Naxos.
I love this concept.
It's so good, right? Because it perfectly captures the anxiety of travel. It's exactly like a blind date.
How so? Walk me through it.
Think about it. Hour 1 is the immediate visual crush. You see the Portara standing there in the sun. You walk off the metal ramp of the ferry onto solid ground. You look around. You aren't shoulder to shoulder with 2 million people pushing you toward a bus. You breathe in the air and you feel this overwhelming wave of relief. You think, I made the right choice. This is the authentic Greece.
Okay, but then?
But then comes hour 4. The honeymoon phase ends and the dread sets in. This is when the sheer, intimidating physical scale of the island hits you. You get to your hotel, you drop your bags, and you realize you want to go to a beach or see a mountain village. You look at a map and realize Naxos is 430 square kilometers.
Jane, you're stuck.
Exactly. You realize the local bus schedule is incredibly sparse, and you absolutely cannot just wander this island on foot. You feel that rising panic in your chest, the realization that you are effectively trapped in your immediate vicinity without wheels.
Which is a terrifying feeling when you've invested thousands of dollars into a vacation.
Exactly. But if you survive that hour 4 panic, you reach hour 12.
The turnaround.
Yes, their sun goes down, the heat breaks. You wander away from your hotel. You sit down at a tiny, dimly lit backstreet taverna in the old town. The owner brings over a carafe of house wine. You take your first bite of proper, slow-cooked Naxian food, and that deep, enduring love is cemented.
The food saves it?
Your shoulders drop. You realize the culinary hype you read about online is entirely real, and everything is going to be okay.
That entire hour 4 panic attack you just described is completely avoidable if you simply understand the transport logistics before you arrive.
Break it down for us.
Let's look at the mobility data. Yes, there are local public buses running from the main town out to Plaka, Augiana, Philodi, and Apollonis. A ticket costs between 2 and 4 euros per journey.
That's cheap.
It is. But as you mentioned, the bus system is fundamentally built for the rhythm of local Naxian life getting locals to work or school. It's not built for the demanding, hyper-scheduled itinerary of a tourist trying to maximize a 5-day stay.
What about taxis?
If you want a taxi from the ferry port down to Plaka Beach, It will run you around 15 euros. But you cannot rely on taxis to explore the inland mountain villages. There simply aren't enough of them, and the dispatch system is highly localized.
So you have to rent.
Therefore, a rental car is the only serious functional option for exploring the island's 430 square kilometers. If you book ahead from home, it's a very reasonable 35 to 50 euros per day.
And if you don't?
If you arrive, experience that hour 4 panic and try to walk up to a rental desk on the street. You are looking at 70 euros plus per day, if they even have any inventory left on the lot.
Huge difference.
You can technically rent a scooter for around 25 euros a day, but we will get into the stark safety data of that decision later. The absolute golden rule of Naxos, which every source agrees on, is this. Book your car before you arrive. On island, walk-up prices mathematically double in July and August due to sheer desperation.
It is the ultimate captive audience tag.
Yeah.
So let's assume you listen to the rule. You've secured your car. Now let's actually map the physical island so you can figure out where you are supposed to be sleeping. Because the geographical zones on Naxos are incredibly distinct, and picking the wrong one will completely alter your trip.
Let's run through the zones.
Let's start with Chora. That is the main town. That is where the ferry port is located. That's where the late-night cocktail bars are, the highest concentration of restaurants, and this beautiful, winding labyrinth of medieval alleys.
Lots of action there.
Tons.
Yeah.
It is the center of the action and offers the best walking access if you don't want to drive at night. Just a 5-minute walk south of the port is Agios Georgios. It's a highly walkable, slightly quieter suburb with a very shallow, family-friendly beach.
Great for kids.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then you move 6 to 7 kilometers south down the coast to Agia, Ana, and Plaka. This is your classic postcard beach resort strip. We are talking long, continuous stretches of white sand where most of the packaged European holidays land.
Very popular.
Way up north, about 35 kilometers away on winding mountain roads, is Apaionis. It's a quiet, isolated fishing village with dramatic mountain access. It is very remote.
You definitely need a car for that.
Oh, absolutely. And finally, you have the inland villages right in the center of the island, Philodi, Halki, and Aparanthos. They are traditional, incredibly cheap to stay in, deeply authentic, and completely 100% car dependent.
All right, let's attach the hard financial costs to those specific zones, categorized by traveler profile so you know exactly what to budget.
Starting with?
Let's start with the backpacker profile. You are looking at places like Kapitanos Rooms or the Ilio Vasilima in Chora. These offer clean basics, decent Wi-Fi, and crucially, a 10-minute walk to the ferry port so you don't need a taxi.
Nice.
In the shoulder season, you are looking at 40 to 55 euros per night for a room. In the peak of July, that jumps to 90 euros. But if you aim for the true shoulder months of May or October, 50 euros a night for a couple is a highly realistic, highly achievable budget.
That is fantastic value.
Now, stepping up to the mid-range couple, you look at properties like Hotel Kaimata or the Coronis Hotel right on the edge of Chora. You have the nightlife within walking distance, but you have a better standard of room.
What's the damage?
Shoulder season here is 90 euros per night. Peak season hits 200. A highly realistic expectation for a mid-June trip is 130 euros a night.
Very doable.
But here is where the math gets genuinely undeniably exciting. There is a property called the Naxos Resort located right near the port. They run a direct partnership package with Blue Star Ferries called the Stay and Ferry deal.
Okay, I love a deal.
It costs exactly 81 euros per person per stay, and it includes the return ferry ticket from Athens.
Wait. Run that math for me again. Because if a round-trip ferry ticket from Athens is already a fixed cost, how on earth is a hotel offering a room in the ferry for 81 euros?
It is a masterclass in shoulder season hospitality logistics. Let's break it down. A standard round-trip Blue Star ferry ticket costs between 74 and 90 euros, depending on the exact seating class. If you deduct that 74 euro minimum from the 81 euro package price, you are essentially paying 7 euros for the hotel accommodation.
So why would a hotel ever do that? They're literally losing money every time someone walks through the door.
Because of the economic realities of the shoulder season. A hotel with 50 empty rooms in early May is hemorrhaging money on fixed-cost staff, electricity, taxes. They would rather offer the room at essentially zero profit or even a slight loss simply to guarantee physical occupancy.
Oh, because of what you spend once you're there.
Exactly, because once you are in the hotel, you are highly likely to buy a 10 euro cocktail by the pool or eat a 25 euro dinner in their restaurant. They are using the ferry ticket as a loss leader to capture your ancillary spending. Mathematically, it is the most unbeatable value deal in the entire agency.
That is just brilliant. It rewards the traveler who actually does the research. But
Yeah.
let's shift to families because their needs are totally different. You aren't squeezing 4 people into a backpacker room.
No, you need space.
You have places like Kavura's Village down in Aja Anna. It's a proper 4-star half-board resort. It has a massive pool, immediate beach access, and a dedicated kids club running in the summer so parents can actually get an hour of peace.
And what's the cost?
In the shoulder season, it runs roughly €200 a night. Peak season spikes to 380. If you are a family, the data shows your absolute sweet spot is late May or late September. By targeting those specific weeks, you can easily execute a 1-week family holiday for under €1,500 total. And that actually includes your flights from major European hubs.
That's a great data point. And then we reach the luxury traveler.
The high rollers.
If you want high-end isolation, you can look at the quiet inland option, like Villa Ilia in Milanis. It's a stunning, private Cycladic villa with a full kitchen, laundry, and total privacy for about €350 a night at the absolute peak. But I really have to highlight a specific hotel in Chora called the St. Vlasis. It has a staggering 4.9-star guest rating across thousands of reviews. It's boutique, deeply personalized, and it runs about €280 a night in the shoulder season, rising to €520 in the July peak.
Okay, look, €520 a night is a highly significant outlay. For many people, that breaks the definition of budget travel.
It does.
But we have to contextualize that figure against the regional market. We have to contrast that €520 with Santorini.
Please, let's contrast it.
Because this drives me absolutely crazy.
Right.
A comparable luxury suite in Santorini, specifically those famous cave suites carved into the caldera, starts at €800 a night in 2026.
Starts at 800. What?
Starts. And I want you to think about what you are actually getting for that €800. You are paying to sleep in a literal cave. It gets incredibly damp. The ventilation is often terrible. And worst of all, there is zero privacy.
Right, because of how they're built.
Exactly. You have this beautiful little private hot tub on your terrace, but the way Santorini is built on a cliffside means there is a public walking path situated directly above your suite.
Oh, no.
So you are paying €800 a night to sit in a tub while thousands of sweaty cruise ship passengers peer over the railing, staring at you, taking photos of the view right over your head. It is absurd.
That's the opposite of luxury.
Meanwhile, the St. Vlasis rating of 4.9 is not some manipulated fluke. It is consistently one of the best-reviewed hotels in all of Greece. You are paying €520 at peak for genuine 4.9-star hospitality, actual peace and quiet, a real connection with the staff who know your name, and a bed that doesn't smell like a damp cavern.
Makes sense.
That is far more valuable to a true luxury traveler than paying an €800 premium just for a geotag on social media to prove you went to Santorini.
The contrast in the definition of luxury is stark. Santorini sells visual status, Naxos sells experiential comfort. I will still take the Naxos Resort's €81 stay and ferry package for the mid-range traveler, as it remains an absolute masterclass in logistical bundling. But your argument for the luxury sector completely holds up to the data.
I think so too.
So you have saved potentially hundreds, if not thousands of euros on your accommodation simply by choosing Naxos. The next logical question is, where do you deploy those massive savings?
Food.
The answer lies in the culinary sector, because the food system on Naxos is not just good for a tourist island, it is the premier agricultural and culinary engine of the entire Cyclades.
It really is the food island. When you go to most small Greek islands, you have to realize that almost everything you eat has been shipped in on a ferry that morning. The tomatoes, the meat, the cheese, it's all imported just to feed the tourist machines.
But not Naxos.
Not Naxos. Naxos is completely different. Naxos is fertile. They grow it, they raise it, they produce it right there in the valleys. The local cheese production isn't just a side hustle. It is a deeply serious, multi-generational craft.
Tell me about the cheese.
Okay, you have Graviera Naxos, which is an officially recognized protected designation of origin hard cheese. It is literally aged in mountain caves. It's not some bland supermarket block. You bite into it, and you can physically taste the terroir. You can taste the wild herbs the sheep and goats grazed on. It has a slightly sweet, nutty flavor that is incredible.
Sounds amazing.
Then there is arsenico, which is a much sharper, saltier, bolder counterpart. It crumbles beautifully over pasta. And then for after dinner, you absolutely have to try Kitron, the island's signature liqueur.
Kitron, like lemon.
Sort of. It is distilled exclusively on Naxos from the leaves of the citron tree, which looks like a large, bumpy lemon. These aren't just cute props they sell in gift shops and decorative bottles to trap tourists. These are active, vital components of the local food system that Naxian families consume every single day.
And that deep, authentic local integration is directly reflected in the pricing structure, provided you know how to navigate the physical geography of the island's restaurants.
The geography of restaurants. I like that.
The cost disparity based on mere meters of walking is brutal. Let's look at Chora. If you sit at a beautiful waterfront taverna, right on the promenade watching the boats bob in the water, a standard meal with local wine will consistently cost you between 25 and 35 euros per person.
Okay.
Now, if you stand up from that table, turn your back to the water, and walk exactly 200 meters inland into the narrow, winding back streets, the exact same volume of food drops to 14 to 18 euros per person.
Wow. 200 meters.
Yes. It is a 40 to 60% markup simply for the privilege of looking at the water in July and August. And statistically, because those waterfront establishments cater almost exclusively to one-time transit tourists stepping off a ferry, the culinary quality is often markedly lower than the places inland that rely on repeat local business.
Look, I know we all constantly hear the travel cliche, eat where the locals eat. It's beaten into our heads. But let's be totally honest with ourselves. When you arrive on a Greek island after a long day of travel, isn't it incredibly tempting to just sit right down by the water for the view?
It's very tempting.
You've traveled all this way, you see the sea, the lights are beautifully reflecting on the waves, the breeze feels amazing. It takes real concerted willpower to walk away from that postcard setting and head down a dark, narrow alley.
It does.
But you have to do it. The named winners in our sources prove that the inland walk is mandatory. You go to a place called Tuolenico, hidden in the labyrinth of Chora, and you order a traditional moussaka that will genuinely change your life, and it's only around 12 euros.
12 euros.
Right. Or if you have your rental car, you drive out near Kastraki Beach to an inland taverna called Axiotissa. They serve this slow-cooked lamb and vegetables that are grown literally right in their own garden out back, and a huge plate is only about 16 euros.
That's a steal.
Or you go to Metaximas in the Old Town for an array of fresh seafood mezaides at around 22 euros a person. It is overwhelmingly worth the walk inland. And when you sit down at these authentic places, there is a strict cultural etiquette you must observe.
Which is?
Never, under any circumstances, ask for substitutions on a menu.
From a pure logistics standpoint, asking for substitutions disrupts a highly synchronized kitchen that is cooking large batches of traditional food. But more importantly, from a cultural standpoint, it is considered mildly insulting to the chef's curation.
I cannot emphasize this enough. You are not at a 24-hour diner. The chef in the back is likely preparing traditional regional recipes that have been handed down from their grandmother. To ask them to swap out a specific side dish or put a sauce on the side or change the cooking method is essentially telling them that your palate knows better than generations of Naxian tradition.
Just trust the menu.
Just trust the menu. Let them feed you the way they want to feed you. Also, regarding payment, always remember to tip roughly 5 to 10% and do it in physical cash.
Handing a few euro coins directly to the server ensures they actually get it, rather than it getting lost in a credit card processing system.
Exactly. And finally, you have to adjust your internal biological clock. A true atmospheric Greek dinner does not start before 9:00 p.m.
Not a minute before.
If you show up at a taverna at 7:00 p.m., you are going to be eating entirely alone. The staff will still be setting tables, and you will completely miss the magical vibe of the taverna coming alive with loud conversation, clinking glasses, and the cool evening air.
Now, for those who prefer to self-cater, perhaps families renting a villa with a kitchen who want to avoid the tavernas altogether, the grocery economics on Naxos are highly favorable.
Let's talk groceries.
The main supermarket, located conveniently near the port, is AB Vasilopolis. If we analyze the 2026 data, Greek supermarket prices remain significantly lower than their UK, US, and Australian equivalents, specifically on wine and fresh, locally grown produce, though they are broadly similar on imported boxed goods like cereal.
So buy local.
Right. A 500 milliliter bottle of highly drinkable local Greek wine is between 6 and 9 euros. A kilo of fresh, vine-ripened tomatoes, which taste exponentially better than greenhouse tomatoes, is just 2 euros and 50 cents.
Amazing.
You can buy an entire wheel of that cave-aged Graviera Naxos cheese you described for 18 euros. A 500 milliliter tin of local first-press extra virgin olive oil is 8 euros. And a massive loaf of crusty bread from a local Fornos, which is a traditional Greek bakery, is only 1 euro and 50 cents.
So if we take all of those taverna meal numbers, add in those incredibly cheap grocery costs, and combine them with the accommodation zones we mapped out earlier, let's distill this vast amount of data into actual daily survival budgets.
Okay, let's crunch the numbers.
If I am planning a trip right now, what does it actually cost out of pocket to live on this island for 24 hours?
We have extracted 4 distinct, mathematically proven daily budget profiles based on our sources. Let's start at the bottom with the low budget or the backpacker profile.
All right, what are we looking at?
You're looking at exactly 75 euros per day.
75 euros.
Yes. That tight budget breaks down to 35 euros for shared or very basic accommodation, 20 euros for food, which means you are relying heavily on those 1 euro 50 bakery trips and grabbing 2 euro pork gyros instead of sit-down meals, 8 euros for local public transport buses, 5 euros for minor attractions or entry fees, and 7 euros for miscellaneous expenses like a coffee.
That is lean, but definitely doable.
Moving up the economic ladder to the mid-range couple, you are budgeting 145 euros per day per person.
Okay, so 145, what does that get me?
That allocates 65 euros for a solid, comfortable hotel room, 45 euros for food, which allows for 2 seated taverna meals with house wine, 15 euros for shared transport, assuming you split a 30 euro rental car, 10 euros for attractions, and 10 euros miscellaneous.
Okay, what about the luxury traveler? If they aren't paying 800 euros for a cave, what are they spending?
The high budget profile tops out at 380 euros per day per person.
Got it.
That generously covers 220 euros for premium boutique accommodation like the St. Blasies, 85 euros for premium dining and bottled estate wines, 35 euros for private taxi transport or premium SUV rentals, 25 euros for higher-end attractions or guided tours, and 15 euros miscellaneous.
Sounds like a dream. Are there any other profiles?
Yes, we have a very specific 4th category, the digital nomad profile. This is calculated on a monthly basis and strictly for the shoulder season only.
What's the bottom line?
It requires exactly 1,650 euros per month.
Wow.
That breaks down into a long-stay apartment rental for around 800 euros, groceries at 350, transport at 200, dedicated co-working space access and high-speed Wi-Fi at 150, and social or entertainment expenses at 150.
Okay.
But our sources are incredibly firm on this warning. That specific mathematical model fails entirely the moment summer hits. From May onwards, prices triple, and the monthly rental market completely disappears as landlords convert their apartments back into lucrative short-term holiday pools. Naxos is fundamentally not a July digital nomad destination.
I really want to dwell on that digital nomad figure for a second because I know a lot of people listen to this while sitting at a desk, dreaming of moving to Greece.
Oh, definitely.
1,650 euros a month sounds incredibly low for Western Europe. Is that actually a high-quality, enjoyable lifestyle, or are you just huddled in a cheap freezing room, staring at your laptop and surviving on that 1 euro 50 bread and the 8 euro olive oil you mentioned just to scrape by?
The economic data proves it is a genuinely high-quality lifestyle, provided you follow the calendar rule and are there in October or April. 800 euros a month in the shoulder season does not get you a freezing room. It secures a very comfortable, fully furnished, modern apartment, highly likely with a balcony and a sea view, simply because the short-term tourist demand has completely evaporated. Landlords are desperate for guaranteed winter income.
And the food budget.
That 350 euros for groceries, given the fact that tomatoes are 2.50 a kilo and local wine is 6 euros, allows for an incredibly rich, fresh, healthy Mediterranean diet. You aren't eating ramen. You are eating fresh vegetables, local cheeses, and olive oil every single day. It's not a survival budget. It's a fully integrated cultural immersion budget.
I love that.
But I must reiterate the warning. You have to pack up and leave before May, or that 800 euro apartment becomes 2,500 literally overnight, and your landlord will legally evict you to capture the tourist surge.
Okay, so the daily budget looks fantastic across the board, and the island sounds like an absolute dream scenario. Provided, of course, that you don't step on one of the three massive, highly specific logistical landmines that we know completely ruin trips. Let's get into the named traps, because this is where vacations go to die.
Trap number 1 is the on-arrival car rental disaster. We previewed this earlier, but let's deeply unpack the mechanism behind it. Travelers arrive from countries like the US or the UK, where you can simply step off a plane or a train, walk up to a brightly lit Hertz or Avis desk, swipe a credit card, and drive away in 5 minutes.
Right.
They subconsciously assume Naxos operates on that same infinite inventory model. The reality on a Greek island is drastically different. The physical number of cars on the island is strictly capped by what can be brought over on ferries in the spring.
Oh, that makes sense.
If you book ahead from your laptop for July and August, rentals run a very reasonable 35 to 50 euros per day. But if you assume you can just walk up on arrival, you are competing with hundreds of other panicked tourists for a handful of unreserved cars.
And what happens to the price?
If there are any vehicles left at all, the local agencies will ruthlessly exploit that demand, and you will pay between 70 and 120 euros per day.
Yikes. So what's the fix?
The fix is absolute and non-negotiable. You must book through digital aggregators like Discover Cars or directly with local, reputable agencies like Naxos Motor Rental at least 3 full weeks ahead of your arrival. The deposit is almost always fully refundable if your plans change, and the mathematical saving is anywhere between 150 and 400 euros on a single week's rental.
That is a staggering amount of money to essentially throw into the ocean just because you couldn't be bothered to send an email 3 weeks prior.
Exactly.
Trap number 2 is equally frustrating, but it hits you emotionally rather than financially. It's the Portara Sunset tourist funnel. The mechanism driving this trap is purely psychological.
Tell me about it.
Every single guidebook published in the last decade, every travel blog, every viral social media post tells you that you absolutely must watch the sunset through the marble doorway of the Portara. It sounds incredibly romantic, right?
Sounds perfect.
You picture yourself standing by a 2,500-year-old marble ruin, holding your partner's hand as the golden sun dips perfectly into the Aegean Sea. But let me describe the visceral reality of what happens when 350,000 tourists all read the exact same guidebook.
Idiot.
Total chaos. Between 7 p.m. and 9:00 p.m. in the peak summer, that narrow rocky causeway connecting the main town to the islet and the small footprint of the temple itself fills with upwards of 400 people.
Oh my God.
It's a physical crush of sweating bodies. People are jockeying for position, elbowing each other. It's exactly like trying to experience Times Square on New Year's Eve, but on a tiny rock in the ocean. It is spectacularly romantic in theory and utterly miserably stressful in reality.
And the price is nearby.
Oh, furthermore, the tavernas located on the street, immediately adjacent to the causeway, dynamically double their prices because of the sheer volume of captive foot traffic passing by, and that perfect, serene photograph you wanted. It is entirely ruined by hundreds of glowing smartphone screens raised in the air and tourists accidentally walking into your frame.
The logistical fix for the Portara sunset trap is surprisingly simple, but it requires a level of vacation discipline most people lack.
Okay, what is it?
You skip the sunset entirely and you go at sunrise instead.
Brilliant.
At 6 a.m., the Portara is completely empty. The physical light hitting the ancient marble as the sun comes up over the mountains provides the exact same rich golden hue as the sunset, but you have the entire 2,500-year-old monument completely to yourself. You can take your unobstructed photos, you can actually sit on the stones and enjoy the profound silence of the Aegean.
And then?
And then, at 9 a.m., you casually walk back into town just as the tavernas open at their normal, uninflated daytime prices for a proper, relaxed post-walk breakfast.
It is infinitely superior. You get the beauty without the stress. Now let's talk about trap number 3. And I have to say, this one is just brutal because it ruins your trip before you even leave Athens.
Trap number 3 is the Saturday ferry booking collapse. Here's the mechanical failure that catches thousands of tourists every summer. The standard international traveler, restricted by corporate vacation policies, flies into the Athens airport on a Saturday. They naturally attempt to book a same-day, Saturday afternoon ferry out to Naxos to immediately start their island holiday.
Right.
What they fail to realize is that Saturday is the single busiest, most congested ferry day of the entire week across the entire Greek maritime network. The reliable, comfortable 37-euro Blue Star ferries fill to absolute legal physical capacity up to 2 weeks ahead of time in July and August.
So if they show up on the day,
Travelers who wait until they physically arrive at the Athens airport to check ferry schedules are suddenly faced with a total collapse in their options. Because the Blue Star is sold out, they are either forced onto the rough, uncomfortable Seajets high-speed vessels at a steep €75 one-way premium, which, as we discussed, causes severe motion sickness, or worse.
It gets worse.
They find that everything is sold out, and they are entirely stranded in Athens for the night, bleeding money on an unplanned hotel while losing a day of their island vacation.
Oh, that is devastating. So what is the actual fix? Do I just cross my fingers and book months in advance?
The fix requires a fundamental restructuring of your flight itinerary before you even buy your plane tickets. You cannot fly in on a Saturday. You must book your flight to arrive in Athens on a Friday evening.
Okay, Friday evening. Then what?
You collect your bags, take the train down to the port, and book a single night at a basic utilitarian port hotel in Piraeus, which will cost between 60 and 80 euros. You wake up early the next morning, and you walk straight onto the 7:30 a.m. Sunday morning Blue Star ferry, which operates at the off-peak rate of just 37 euros.
Wow.
By doing this, you bypass the massive Saturday bottleneck entirely, you save money on the overall crossing, and you guarantee that you are on the larger, far more comfortable ship.
Avoiding financial traps and logistical headaches is one thing. That saves your wallet and your sanity. But physical safety is another conversation entirely, and it's something you absolutely have to factor in when deciding if a destination is worth the investment. Let's take a hard look at the island's safety profile, because while it is generally exceptional, there are very specific severe hazards you need to know about. Let's start with the good news. Violent crime against tourists on Naxos is essentially zero. It is statistically non-existent. Scams are also essentially zero. This is simply not a scam-driven culture. You don't have to worry about the rigged taxi meters, or the fake menu prices where they charge you 500 euros for a drink, or the aggressive street hustlers that you see in some major European capitals. But there is a real, undeniable risk hierarchy you have to respect.
The medical data from the local clinics is incredibly clear on what actually injures and hospitalizes tourists on Naxos. Number one, by a massive undeniable margin, is road accidents on rented scooters.
Yes, and let me tell you exactly why this happens. When people go on holiday, their psychology shifts. They get what I call holiday confidence.
Oh, fine.
They step off the plane, they put on a pair of sunglasses, the sun is shining, they see a local zip by on a moped, and suddenly they think they are a seasoned Italian Vespa rider in a movie montage. They completely ignore the fact that they haven't ridden a two-wheeled motorized vehicle in their entire adult lives. They rent a scooter because it's cheap and looks fun.
And that's a huge mistake.
But the reality of Naxos is that the island roads are intensely steep. They wind around mountainsides. They are frequently covered in loose gravel that acts like ice under scooter tires. They are poorly signed. And the locals drive incredibly fast because they have memorized every single blind corner since childhood. Renting a scooter when you have zero prior motorcycle experience is the absolute top avoidable risk on the island. It is how you end up spending your vacation in a clinic with road rash.
It is a critical hazard that ruins hundreds of trips a year. And if a severe accident does happen, we need to talk about the stark reality of the island's medical infrastructure.
Okay, what happens if you get hurt?
The nearest full hospital is located in Chora. It can handle minor injuries and stabilize patients. But for anything requiring complex surgery, severe trauma care, or intensive care, the standard mandatory protocol is an emergency helicopter evacuation straight to a major hospital in Athens.
Helicopter evacuation. That sounds incredibly expensive.
Now, if you are a UK visitor, this terrifying expense is fully covered by EU travel insurance under the GHIC scheme. But the hard logistical advice for anyone with pre-existing conditions is this. Apollonius and the remote northern villages have absolutely minimal, almost non-existent medical infrastructure. If you have any sort of health concern, a heart condition, or require specialized medication, you must base your accommodation strictly within a 15-kilometer radius of Chora to ensure you have immediate access to that stabilization clinic and the helicopter pad.
The second major physical risk is located right in the water. We talked earlier about how incredibly beautiful and inviting the sandy beaches at Plaka and Agios Prokopios are. But when the Meltemi wind kicks up in the middle of summer, and it does, fiercely, sometimes blowing for days on end, it drives incredibly strong, invisible offshore currents.
You have to be careful.
The lifeguards post red warning flags on the beach, but tourists so often ignore them because they look at the water, see that it is crystal clear and blue, and assume it must be safe.
Yeah.
You cannot fight the Meltemi current. You have to respect the flags.
And the third risk?
And the third risk is far less dangerous, but still annoying. minor theft. We are not talking about muggings or pickpockets. We are talking purely about crimes of opportunity. People get too comfortable. They leave their expensive designer beach bags, loaded with smartphones and wallets, completely unattended on the sand at Plaka or Agiana in the middle of July while they go swimming for an hour. Someone walks by, grabs it, and keeps walking. Just use basic common sense and don't leave your valuables exposed.
Those are the specific physical risks. But how does the island rate for broader demographic-specific safety?
For solo female travelers, Naxos has among the strongest safety ratings in the entire Mediterranean region. It is an incredibly secure environment. You can walk alone through the dark, winding labyrinth of alleys in Chora at midnight and feel completely, totally at ease. There is no catcalling, no aggressive lingering.
That's reassuring.
The tavernas play a huge role in this because they are almost all multi-generational, family-run businesses, and they have this wonderful, protective, village-minded culture. If you are a woman dining alone, the owners actively look out for you, they make sure you are seated comfortably, they chat with you, and they keep a watchful eye to ensure you aren't being bothered by anyone. It's a wonderfully supportive place to travel alone.
What about families?
For families with young children, it is equally excellent. The major sandy beaches on the west coast have very gradual, shallow entries, meaning toddlers can wade safely for meters without dropping off into deep water. The tavernas actively welcome children, even late into the evening, without batting an eye. It's a deeply family-centric culture where kids are expected to be part of the evening energy.
With that baseline of safety established, let's pivot to looking at the actual return on investment for your time, because you only have so many days on the island. What are the specific experiences that actually deliver deep, lasting value, and what are the highly marketed disappointments that waste your time and money? We need to separate the brochure hype from the grounded reality.
The absolute best memory you will take home from Naxos, the one you will tell your friends about for years, is driving up into the mountains and walking the marble-paved streets of a Piraeus village at dusk. This is a high inland mountain village. By 6:00 p.m., the tour buses and the day trippers have all gone back down to the coast. The profound silence of the mountains settles in, the air cools down rapidly, and the only sound you can hear echoing through the valley is the rhythmic clinking of bells from the goat herds moving along the ridges.
Sounds magical.
The architecture isn't painted white. It is pure, untouched, exposed stone. It feels exactly like stepping into a living, breathing time machine. It is the authentic Greece of 50 years ago, completely functional and alive, and yet it is only a 30-minute drive away from a modern, bustling beach resort.
Yeah.
That stark contrast, that depth, is the true magic of Naxos.
Now contrast that deep, free authenticity with the named, overhyped experiences heavily promoted in our sources. The first major disappointment is the Venetian Castro in Chora. Every single guidebook promises that you can spend half a day exploring this castle complex.
Then can you?
The structural reality on the ground is that it is a 40-minute walkthrough, at maximum. It is historically interesting, yes, but it is not a half-day itinerary. Do not block out your entire morning for it. Second is the Temple of Demeter at Segri. It looks photographically beautiful and vast in the tourism brochures.
But in person.
Structurally, in person. It is literally 4 standing columns and a pile of scattered marble blocks. You pay a €6 entry fee, you walk up to it, and you are entirely done looking at it in exactly 20 minutes. The mathematical return on investment for your time and money there is incredibly weak.
And the third overwhelmingly overhyped experience is exactly what we warned about earlier. Plaka Beach, in the dead center of July. The guidebooks constantly call it the best, most pristine sandy beach in the Cyclades. But in July, it loses all its charm. It transforms into a massive, sweaty nightclub dressed up in sand. You are paying 20 to 25 euros just for the privilege of renting a pair of sunbeds. You are jammed in inches away from a stranger, and the beach clubs behind you are pumping loud, relentless house music by 11 a.m.
That's not relaxing at all.
If you went to the Greek islands looking for the sound of waves and peace, it is completely ruined. But thankfully, there are deeply authentic alternatives right around the corner. Instead of fighting for a sunbed at Plaka, you drive further down to the southwest coast to a place called Aliko Beach. There is zero commercial infrastructure. No sunbeds, no overpriced cocktails, no house music, just an ancient forest of cedar trees growing right out of the white sand dunes, providing massive canopies of natural shade, and it is near empty even in the absolute middle of August.
Perfect.
Instead of falling for the waterfront restaurant traps in Chora, you drive inland to Halki village for lunch at Axiotissa. And instead of paying €6 to look at 4 sad columns at Demeter, you lace up your boots and do the hike from Folodi all the way up Mount Zas. It is completely 100% free. It is the highest physical peak in the entire Cyclades network at 1,004 meters. According to ancient Greek mythology, a cave on this mountain is the literal birthplace of the god Zeus. When you stand at the summit, the panoramic view stretches across the entire Aegean Sea, and you can see half a dozen other islands.
Those specific alternatives provide the maximum experiential yield for minimal financial cost. But, having praised the island, we must address the single biggest, most honest disappointment for a very specific demographic of traveler: the nightlife. Naxos is fundamentally not Mykonos. It does not try to be Mykonos, and it never will be. Travelers who arrive expecting the frenetic, champagne-spraying, all-night energy of a Mykonos beach club will find a starkly different reality. Chora has a few lovely cocktail bars, but the island is largely quiet and shutting down by 1:00 a.m.
And look, if a 1:00 a.m. curfew is an absolute non-negotiable deal breaker for your vacation vibe, then maybe Naxos just isn't your island, and that is perfectly fine. Which brings us to the alternatives. If you are listening to this deep dive right now and realizing Naxos might be a little too quiet or a little too big, let's look at the immediate neighbors in the Aegean.
If you need a pivot, the first logical alternative is Piraeus. It is located just 45 minutes north of Naxos by ferry. You would choose Piraeus over Naxos if you want slightly better, more frequent ferry connections back to Athens, a much more developed, high-end, cosmopolitan food scene specifically concentrated in the incredibly picturesque fishing village of Naousa, and a noticeably buzzier, more energetic mid-range crowd in the evenings.
Okay, but what's the catch?
Here is the honest, data-driven cost comparison. Piraeus runs roughly 15% more expensive than Naxos on all accommodation tiers. Food costs are broadly similar, and ferry costs are identical. So Piraeus perfectly suits the mid-range couple who desperately want more evening buzz, want to dress up a bit more for dinner, and are happy to pay a 15% financial premium for that social energy. Naxos, however, remains the definitive choice for the traveler who prioritizes better, longer beaches, deeper agricultural food authenticity, and a massive, rugged island footprint to explore by car.
The second major alternative is Milos, which is located about 3 hours south by ferry. Milos has become incredibly famous online recently because it has the most dramatic, bizarre, volcanic coastline in the entire Cyclades. It is universally famous for a beach called Serkiniko, which delivers this literal, blindingly lunar-white volcanic landscape. The rock formations curve into the sea, and you absolutely cannot get that specific geological view anywhere else on Earth. But let me ask you this. Looking at the data, if Milos gives you a literal lunar landscape that has no visual equivalent anywhere else in the world, isn't it worth paying a premium just for the sheer unique geology of it?
It depends entirely on how heavily you weigh visual uniqueness against stark, punishing logistical drawbacks. Post-viral fame on social media, Milos is now operating at 20 to 25% more expensive than Naxos across the board, from hotels to rental cars to food.
That's a significant jump.
It is. Furthermore, because of its location, the ferries to Milos are far less frequent and more susceptible to weather cancellations, making tight itinerary planning incredibly difficult. And crucially, the island is experiencing a rapidly shrinking supply of available accommodation because the sudden explosion in demand has vastly outstripped the island's physical building capacity.
So you might not even find a room.
Exactly. Milos absolutely suits the dedicated photographer or the geology-curious traveler who is highly motivated to pay a 25% premium and deal with tough, frustrating logistics just to capture a landscape that doesn't exist elsewhere. But when you dispassionately weigh those logistical drawbacks, Naxos remains the far better, more functional, and more relaxing choice for the generalist traveler who just wants a great Greek holiday.
So we have mapped the entire island. We've gone through the staggering 600% cost swings, the psychological arcs of arriving, the deep dive into daily budgets, the brutal logistical traps, the safety realities, and the neighboring alternatives. It is time to bring all of this data together for the final verdicts. It is time for the "is it worth it" matrix.
Let's run the compiled data against our 5 specific traveler profiles. First, the backpacker. The final verdict is a definitive yes. A €75 per day budget is completely mathematically realistic here. Hostels and basic shared rooms exist for €35 a night if booked correctly. The ferry from Athens is only €37 if you travel off-peak, and the bakery-driven €2 gyro food story works perfectly to keep backpackers well-fed at minimal cost.
Second profile.
Second, the mid-range couple. The verdict is a resounding absolute yes. This is the category where Naxos wins the hardest out of any island in the Mediterranean. €145 per person, per day buys a serious, deeply comfortable, highly authentic Greek islands experience. When you compare the mathematical yield, the sheer joy of that 145 euros against the hyperinflated, crowded 800 euro a night reality of Santorini, the mid-range choice is completely obvious. Naxos dominates this bracket.
Third, the family profile. The verdict is yes. You have perfectly safe, long, sandy beaches with shallow entries that are ideal for young kids. You have deeply accommodating, child-friendly tavernas. You have safe roads within the resort zones of Agiana, and you can secure 4-star half-board resort options with pools for under 380 euros a night in the shoulder season. Just remember the one golden rule. Avoid the first 2 weeks of August at all costs, or your family trip will turn into a stressful crowd management exercise.
And what about luxury?
Fourth, the luxury traveler. The verdict is yes, with very specific conditions. You have to fundamentally understand that the luxury ceiling on Naxos is structurally lower than Santorini or Mykonos. There are no 800 euro cave suites, there are no velvet rope 5-star beach clubs flying in international DJs, and there are no Michelin-starred tasting menus. If luxury to you means impeccable, warm service, farm-to-table food grown in the backyard, and absolute restorative peace at a boutique place like the St. Flassis, then yes, Naxos is profoundly worth it. But if luxury to you means status, scene, and showing off your wealth, then no, you will be deeply disappointed because Naxos does not care about your status.
Finally, the digital nomad profile. The verdict is yes, with conditions. If you go between the months of October and April, the Naxos model works beautifully. The 1,650 euro monthly budget provides an incredibly rich, healthy, peaceful lifestyle. You get a great apartment and amazing food. But from May to September, the long-term rental market simply disappears into the short-term Airbnb pool, and your monthly housing costs will mathematically triple. It fails entirely as a summer digital nomad destination.
Makes sense.
But looking at the decision matrix as a whole, synthesizing all the data, the point that stands out most is the mid-range traveler. They are getting an unparalleled, mathematically unbeatable return on investment on Naxos in 2026.
As we finally wrap up this deep dive into our sources, I want to leave you with one final, unscripted consideration to mull over as you plan your travels. Since places like Santorini implement massive, punitive 20 euro cruise taxes just to build a financial wall against the crushing tide of over-tourism, we have to ask ourselves a difficult question.
What's that?
Is Naxos's current golden era, this perfect balance of 3 euro taxes, empty mountain villages, and affordable luxury, just a ticking clock? With 350,000 tourists arriving this year, and that number growing every single season as people flee Santorini, how many years do we really have before Naxos is forced to build a financial wall of its own? Enjoy that 3 euro tax and that pristine Naxian authenticity while it lasts. If this gave you the honest verdict you needed, follow the show. New episodes drop every day. Host speaker and expert speaker. That is the honest verdict from Phil and H.